Good evening. I'm Vijayapriya Nityananda.
And this is Manitya Priyananda.
December 14th, the United Nations has just established this date as the International Day Against Colonialism in all its forms and manifestations. It's not a coincidence that this day was chosen. December 14, 1960, 55 years ago, the UN adopted the landmark declaration on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples, a historic moment that recognized what the colonized world had known for centuries. Colonialism was not civilization, it was destruction.
But here's what they don't tell you: colonialism didn't just steal land, it didn't just extract wealth, it did something far more sinister. It erased identities, it rewrote histories, and in Hindu civilization, it systematically destroyed the most powerful force that had existed for millennia: the spiritual and social power of women.
Today, we're going to tell you a story about a civilization where women were not just equal, they were revered, where they were warriors, philosophers, temple dancers, spiritual masters, where they held the keys to cosmic knowledge. This is the story of Hindu feminism, the real one, not the Western import, but the ancient sacred tradition that colonizers feared so much they had to destroy it.
And we're going to show you how they did it: through laws, through lies, through systematic cultural genocide. We'll talk about the Madras Devadasi Act of 1947 that criminalized an entire lineage of women. We'll expose the anti Nach movement that branded Hindu women as prostitutes for practicing their sacred art.
But this is not just a story of destruction, it's also a story of resurrection because in 2025, there is a revival to bring it all back, to restore what was stolen, to revive the lineages that were erased. And at the center of this revival is one figure, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam.
So let's begin. Let's go back to a time when Hindu women didn't need permission to be powerful because power was their birthright.
Picture this: 3,000 years ago, ancient Hindu civilization, the Vedic period, a woman stands in royal assembly hall debating the nature of the universe with the greatest sages of her time. Her name is Gargi Vachaknavi. She's not a curiosity, she's not an exception, she's the norm.
Then there was Maitreyi from the Upanishads, one of the most sacred Hindu texts. Records show that her philosophical discourses on the nature of the self, the Atman, and ultimate reality.
Lopamudra was another giant, a princess who married the austere sage Agastya. She composed hymns in the Rig Veda, the oldest of the Hindu scriptures.
These weren't isolated cases. The Rig Veda mentions at least 27 women rishikas, female seers who composed Vedic hymns. Women like Gosha, Apala, Vishvavara, and Romasha. They were the channels through which divine knowledge flowed to humanity.
Now let's talk about warriors because Hindu women didn't just master the mind, they mastered warfare too. Rani Durgavati of Gondwana, 16th century. When her husband died, she took the throne, and when Mughal Emperor Akbar's forces came to conquer her kingdom, she didn't surrender. She rode into battle, she fought with a sword in one hand and strategic brilliance in her mind. She died fighting, wounded by arrows, but never defeated in spirit.
And Rani Abaka Chauta, the queen of Ulala in the 16th century, she is the only woman in history who repeatedly defeated the Portuguese colonial forces, not once, multiple times. The Portuguese came with cannons and ships, and she sent them back humiliated. She formed alliances, used guerrilla tactics, and protected her kingdom for decades. The colonizers wrote about her in terror.
And then there were the yoginis. They were spiritual warriors, the 64 yoginis, manifestations of the divine feminine, represented the cosmic powers. There were temples dedicated to them across the Hindu civilization.
They were artists, spiritual adepts. They understood the sacred sciences. They preserved lineages of knowledge. They were administrators. They were economically independent. They owned property. They commanded respect.
This was Hindu feminism, not women trying to be like men, but women embodying their own unique power, a power that came from Parashakti, the cosmic feminine force, a power that Hindu philosophy recognized as the source of all creation. Because here's what the Hindu worldview understood: Shiva without Shakti is Shava, a corpse. Consciousness without energy is inert. The masculine without the feminine is powerless.
This was the civilization. This was the reality. For thousands of years, Hindu women weren't asking for their place. They already had it. They weren't fighting for recognition. They were already revered. And then came the colonizers.
1700s. The British East India Company is solidifying its grip on the Hindu civilization. But it isn't just a land to be conquered. It's a civilization to be destroyed because the British understood something crucial. You can occupy a country with guns, but you cannot rule it unless you break its spirit.
And Hindu women's power was that spirit. So they set out to break it systematically, methodically, and they used two weapons: Victorian morality and Christian missionary zeal.
The British brought with them a very specific view of women. In Victorian England, a woman's place was in the home. She was to be modest, silent, submissive. Her intelligence was suspect. Her role was to serve men. First, her father, then her husband, then her sons.
When British officers encountered Hindu women who were temple dancers, who owned property, who performed in public, they were scandalized. They couldn't comprehend it. And what you can't comprehend, you demonize.
Now the women dedicated to temple service. They were trained in classical dance, music, and sacred rituals from childhood. They performed in temples, preserving an ancient art form that we today call Bharatanatyam. They were respected. They were economically independent. Many owned land. They were educated. Some were the primary cultural custodians in their communities.
But the British saw something else. They saw women who weren't married to men. They saw women who performed publicly. They saw women with agency, and they branded them as prostitutes.
The anti-Nach movement began in the late 1800s. Nach comes from Nach, the Hindi word for dance. British Christian missionaries launched a campaign to ban temple dancing. They called it immoral. They called these women prostitutes. They created a narrative of sexual exploitation.
In 1934, the Bombay Devadasi Protection Act was passed. In 1947, the Madras Devadasi Prevention of Dedication Act was passed in Tamil Nadu.
The 1947 Act made it a criminal offense to dedicate girls to temples. It outlawed their performances. It stripped them of their hereditary rights to temple properties overnight. Thousands of women who had been respected artists became social outcasts. Their knowledge, passed down through generations, was now branded as criminal.
The impact was devastating. By the time these laws were fully enforced, the communities had been destroyed. The women became impoverished. Many were forced into actual prostitution, the very thing the laws claimed to prevent. They were ostracized. The sacred dance forms nearly died.
But the destruction didn't stop there. The entire framework of women's spiritual power was dismantled. The yogini temples dedicated to the 64 manifestations of goddess fell into ruin.
The impact on Hindu women was generational. By the mid 20th century, the ancient lineages were broken. Girls weren't being initiated into Vedic learning. The yogini traditions were extinct.
Women's roles were reduced, they became confined to the home. Their spiritual authority evaporated. The goddess was still worshipped in festivals, but real women had lost their connection to that divine power.
Of KAILASA, the revival of the ancient KAILASA, the revival of the ancient enlightened Hindu civilizational nation.
Through KAILASA, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam, has established Gurukuls, the traditional indigenous Hindu schools, specifically for girls. These aren't ordinary schools. Girls are trained in Vedic studies, temple rituals, classical arts, and most importantly, power manifestation sciences.
The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has revived the yogini tradition. Today, there are communities of yoginis being trained in the complete spiritual sciences. They perform temple rituals. They lead ceremonies. They demonstrate supernatural, superconscious powers. They are being prepared to be spiritual leaders.
The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam, has also ordained women as Mahamandareshwar, high-ranking spiritual leaders in the Hindu monastic orders. It's a return to the original practice where women held equal spiritual authority.
One of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's gurus was a woman. Her name was Mataji Vivekanandapuri, also known as Kupamal. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism says that the pure mother energy, unadulterated by any other thoughts, is enlightenment, the source of creation, the source of sacredness, the source of divine is mother energy. This isn't sentiment. This is theological doctrine. The feminine is not a path to the divine. It is the divine.
The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam, has established the world's largest library of teachings. Over 300,000 hours of recorded discourses available freely online. Thousands of free books, all translated into multiple languages, and a significant portion focuses specifically on the divine feminine, women's empowerment, and the revival of goddess-centered practices.
KAILASA, the only Hindu nation, has been revived by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism and has a constitution that explicitly enshrines gender transcendence. It recognizes that consciousness is beyond male and female, and that spiritual authority is not determined by biology, but by realization.
Women from around the world have participated in KAILASA's various services. Many report profound transformations, healing from trauma, release from shame, awakening of spiritual abilities, connection to a lineage they never knew existed.
And on the International Day Against Colonialism, this matters because the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is systematically dismantling the colonial, proving that Hindu civilization doesn't need Western feminism because it had its own, far more profound understanding of the divine feminine.
So let's zoom out for a moment, because this isn't a story just about Hinduism, about Sanatan Hindu Dharma. It's about colonialism, what colonialism does to every indigenous civilization it touches.
Across Africa, colonizers criminalized traditional spiritual practices, branded local healers as witches, and destroyed matrilineal societies. In Native American communities, colonizers forcibly removed children from their mothers, banned indigenous languages and ceremonies, and shattered the sacred feminine traditions of the tribes, where women held significant spiritual authority.
In Aboriginal Australia, in the Pacific Islands, in indigenous South America, the pattern is the same. Colonialism doesn't just extract resources, it extracts meaning. It severs people from their roots, and it especially targets women's power because women are the transmitters of culture.
The United Nations establishment of December 14th as the International Day
They are embarrassed by their rituals. They celebrate Western holidays more enthusiastically than their own festivals.
and Hindu women are caught in a particular bind. Western feminism tells them their tradition oppressed them. The left tells them their religion is patriarchy. Everyone has an opinion about what Hindu women should be, except Hindu women themselves, drawing from their own deep wells of tradition.
This is why the work of revival matters, not because we should uncritically return to the past, but because reclaiming what was powerful in your own tradition is fundamentally different from having Western ideologies imposed on you.
Western feminism emerged from the specific context of Christian patriarchy and European Enlightenment. It's concerned with individual rights, gender equality in the workplace, bodily autonomy in Western legal contexts. These are important issues, but they are not universal.
Hindu philosophy approaches the feminine differently. It's not about women being unique, it's about Shakti being the source of all power. It's not about bodily autonomy in isolation, it's about understanding your body as a temple, a macrocosm of the universe, a vehicle for enlightenment.
The Hindu feminine ideal isn't the career woman or the housewife. It's the woman who embodies Devi, who is fierce like Kali when necessary, nurturing like Lakshmi when appropriate, wise like Saraswati always, who understands that power doesn't mean competing with men, but channeling cosmic energy.
This is a completely different paradigm. And for centuries, it worked. Hindu women had property rights when European women didn't. Hindu women could be warriors when European women were confined to castles. Hindu women were philosophers when European women were burned as witches for knowing too much.
The tragedy is that colonialism convinced even Hindus that their own tradition was inferior, that their goddesses were primitive, that their powerful women were anomalies.
The revival that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam, is undertaking is about correcting that record. It's about saying we had something powerful, we lost it, and we are reclaiming it back.
But here's the challenge. How do you revive something without creating a museum? How do you make ancient wisdom relevant to women living in 2025 with smartphones and careers and complex modern identities?
The answer, as revealed by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, is that the ancient wisdom was never about specific time periods. It is about the eternal truths of consciousness. A woman in 2025 has the same energy system as a woman in the 1925 in the 1025 BCE. Her chakras work the same way. Her kundalini awakens through the same process. The techniques are timeless.
What needs updating isn't the core science, it's the cultural packaging. A modern woman doesn't need to wear ancient clothes or abandon technology to practice Hinduism. She needs the knowledge to be accessible. practical and applicable in her life.
And this is where genuine revival differs from mere nostalgia. Nostalgia wants to recreate the past. Revival wants to make the past's wisdom functional in the present.
This is the work of decolonization, reclaiming your mind from the colonizer's narrative, reclaiming your body from the imposed shame, reclaiming your spirit from the disconnection they engineered.
And on the first ever UN International Day against colonialism, perhaps that's the most fitting recognition that the battle against colonialism isn't over, it's ongoing. In every
They didn't take everything. Memory persists, knowledge survives, and revival is possible. It has already begun.
So let's bring this home. We've covered a lot of ground tonight. The golden era of Hindu women, philosophers, warriors, yoginis, spiritual masters, the systematic destruction under colonialism, the anti-notch movement, the criminalization of an entire lineage, and the modern revival. The work of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagwan Nityananda Paramashivam, to restore these traditions.
What do we take away from all of this? Here are 3 things.
First, know your history. The narrative you've been taught about Hindu women, that they were always oppressed, always secondary, always victims, is incomplete at best. Propaganda is complex. Gargi and Maitreyi, learn about the yogini temples, understand who the ancient Hindu women actually were before colonial distortion.
Second, question the shame. If you're a Hindu woman and you feel shame about your body, your traditions, your heritage, ask where that shame came from. Chances are it's not from the ancient wisdom. It's from colonial morality imposed on you.
Third, decide to reclaim. You don't have to accept everything wholesale, but neither should you reject everything because colonizers told you it was backward. Examine each practice on its own merits. Does it empower you? Does it connect you to something greater than yourself? Does it offer practical tools for your actual life? If yes, explore it. But make that decision yourself, not based on someone.
Didn't oppress them. Colonialism did. What if liberation doesn't come from abandoning your roots, but from rediscovering them?
These are the questions that the revival is asking, and whether you agree with specific methods, the questions themselves are important.
And we recognize that colonialism's greatest crime wasn't just economic exploitation, it was identity theft. It stole people's sense of who they were and replaced it with who the colonizers wanted them to be.
The work of decolonization is the work of remembering, and for Hindu women, that means remembering that you come from a lineage of goddesses, that your ancestors were Shakti embodied, that spiritual power is your birthright, not something you need permission to access.
The Vedas say, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. I am the ultimate reality. Not he is Brahman, not they are Brahman, but I am. Every individual, regardless of gender.
Hindu Dharma is even more direct. It says, Yatra naryastu pujanti ramante tatra devataha. Where women are honored, there the gods dwell. Not because women need protection or pedestals, but because honoring the feminine principle is recognizing the creative force of the universe itself.
So, to every woman watching tonight, Hindu or not, who has ever felt disconnected from her own power, who has ever internalized shame about her body, who has ever wondered if there's more to her existence than what modern materialism offers, to you, I urge you, explore your roots. wisdom that colonialism tried to bury but couldn't fully kill.
And to everyone watching, men and women alike, understand this. When we cut women off from their spiritual power, we don't just harm women, we harm civilization, because that power, Shakti, is the creative force that builds cultures, raises children, transmits values, and holds communities together.
The 21st century needs that power. We face civilizational challenges, climate crisis, spiritual emptiness, technological disconnection. These can't be solved purely by masculine logic and force. They require the feminine qualities: intuition, interconnection, nurturing, fierce protective love.
The ancient Hindu understanding was that the cosmos itself is balanced between Shiva and Shakti, consciousness and energy, the masculine and feminine. When that balance is lost, chaos ensues. We are living in that chaos now.
The revival of Hindu feminism offers a path back to balance, not by rejecting the masculine, but by restoring the feminine to its rightful place as divine.
The seeds have been planted, the conversation has begun, and on the historic day, the first UN International Day Against Colonialism, we acknowledge that the journey of decolonization includes a spiritual restoration.
From all of us here, we thank you for watching, and we encourage you to research more, to question, to explore. You can visit kailasa.org to learn more. If you want to become a part of this revival by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, you can visit ecitizen.info and learn more. And we urge you to subscribe so you can learn more about KAILASA and the revival of Hindu feminism.
And you can also scan the QR code being projected so you can learn more how to participate and become part of KAILASA, become part of this revival. And remember, you are the heir to thousands of years of wisdom. Don't let anyone, colonizer or contemporary, convince you otherwise.
Good night, and may you remember who you truly are.
Good night.